Welcome back guys, I hope you had a happy and healthy Easter while I was working on this video for you. Today I will show you a complete guide on what items to keep when you go for Epic Gear, why is Epic Gear better and which engravings to look for when you look for Epic Gear. And for the ones who still have their Epic Gear and haven't sold them already, I will show you what you can safely dismantle and what you should keep in your inventory. So some people might still ask, why should we even look for Epic Gear? Because Epic Gear is better than Legendary Gear. The engravings on Epic Gear are randomized. That means when you are lucky, you can get much better combinations than on the Legendary items. And when you compare the armor pieces, Epic armor pieces always have 4 engraving slots and Legendary ones only 3. That gives you 20 slots compared to 15 slots when you use complete Epic armor pieces. And these 5 additional engravings are much more worth than the Legendary set bonus. And that holds true for each and every Legendary set, even for the best ones. Legendary weapons are good if they have the correct engravings, but most of them don't have the correct engravings, which also makes most of the Legendary weapons bad as well. But if they have the correct engravings, their DPS value is around 5% higher than an Epic one. But most of the time, Epic weapons still win because of the much better engravings. But of course not every Epic gear is good. There's lots and lots of rubbish Epic gear which you should get rid of. But you have to make sure they do not contain the valuable engravings you want to keep. When you get rid of your bad Epic items, the best option is to sell them. Selling your Epic items gives you a certain amount of money. When you dismantle the items, you get a certain amount of materials. But the materials are getting discounted very early on from Mercenary Tier 8. You can reach that within a couple of hours, like 5 hours or 8 hours of playtime, you will reach Mercenary Tier 8, the second lowest rank you can get. That gives you a purchasing bonus, 50% discount on all the items from Blacksmith. And that includes the materials. You will not get the double amount of resources when you dismantle it, but you can now buy with the same amount of money the double amount of resources. That's why selling weapons is always better unless you have reached the money cap. Let's take a look at the items and the engravings you should actually keep. Since weapons are the easiest to explain, I will start with the weapons first. Perfect weapons for a warrior player have warrior damage, then critical damage and the damage with the corresponding weapon type. So when you play with swords, you have to have damage with swords. These 3 engravings are mandatory for warrior players. When you use staffs, of course, then warrior damage, critical damage and damage with staffs accordingly. That rule can be applied to all melee weapons for warrior players. However, when you play hunter, you should look for weapons with hunter damage, critical damage and the elemental type of your choice, either fire or poison. That would make perfect hunter melee weapons. Good assassin weapons should have assassin damage and critical damage and then anything you want. Elemental damage might be a viable option or like the weapon damage multipliers, but both have no effect on assassinations. For the bow, it depends mostly on your build. There are 2 very good hunter bows available. First of all, the Oaken Bow of Chambers that can be found in the Tomb of the Daughters of Atlas in Arcadia, and the legendary Achilles bow with the big devastating shot bonus on it. Not to forget that there's also a glitched item, the Bighorn bow, which increases your warrior damage by a factor of 1.6 and increases also your hunter damage, so make sure to check it out and check out the glitch builds. Items you should definitely keep are items with crit chance at full health, crit damage and crit damage at full health. This is by far the biggest damage driver you can get once you achieve 100% crit chance. That will always trigger your crit damage multiplier. So make sure to get crit chance to 100% and increase your crit damage multiplier as much as possible with these engravings. The second group are the damage multipliers for your melee weapons, like damage with swords, damage with daggers, damage with spears, damage with heavy blunts. You have them on melee weapons, but you also have them on certain gear pieces. Damage with swords and daggers is on the helmet, damage with heavy blades and heavy blunts is on the torso, and damage with staffs and spears is on the boots. So make sure when you also have these armor pieces that you should keep these engravings. The next group of engravings for items you have to keep is resistances, like melee resistance, range resistance, elemental resistance and chance to ignore half damage. These 4 engravings are most important for tank builds. For elemental damage engravings, you should only keep fire damage and poison damage. For hunter players, there are a couple of more engravings you should keep. First of all, headshot damage, which acts like crit damage but only applied when you make a headshot. Then damage with bow charge shot, that can be better than all damage on the torso or on the bow. And bow charging speed. Some of the hunter abilities rely on a maximum charge shot. So for example, devastating shot relies on maximum charge, so bow charging speed will really help you out. Items which have the following engravings should be dismantled. But please keep in mind that you could still use some of these items before you find better ones. You don't have to dismantle everything until you find the perfect item. You can just use what you have until you find better ones. One big warning here at this point, because you have to check the list of unique weapons so that you do not accidentally dismantle a unique weapon just because it also contained a bad engraving. For example, the copycat sword is one of the best swords in the game. It has 10% crit chance on a melee weapon, really useful. I used it in the god build. So if you just dismantle it because it has damage on Spartan soldiers, then you lose that valuable item. Speaking of damage to Spartan soldiers, the first group of items you should dismantle is damage on certain enemy types, like damage to Spartans, damage to Isu, damage to Athenians, damage to animals. They add just a small bonus on top of it. They do not directly increase your warrior damage, and therefore they also do not use the damage with swords or damage with spears multiplier. So they add just a small bonus on top of it, and therefore it's not worth going for them. And they also go only for a certain enemy type. That's a real waste of an engraving. Then we have items that have multiple primary engravings, like warrior damage, hunter damage and assassin damage all on the same item. That's really bad, because you do not want to focus on all three of them. You just want to focus on one and then add some crit chance or crit damage instead of having assassin damage, which is much better. You can spread your hunter and assassin damage on multiple items, but then use the second and third engraving for crit damage, crit chance or better stuff. So if you discover an item which has warrior damage and hunter damage or assassin damage on one of the other spots, then it's basically an immediate dismantle, except if it's on the torso or on the bow. There it can be useful to have a second type, so if you want to convert it back to the other type. The next group of items to dismantle is adrenaline bonuses. Items with adrenaline bonuses are really not worth keeping, and sadly a lot of legendary items also have adrenaline bonuses, and so they are mostly bad and not worth using, because adrenaline is so easy to get, and there is lots of mastery abilities where you can just use your points to get huge adrenaline bonuses. You should just focus on increasing your damage instead of increasing your adrenaline. Increasing damage is much harder, and therefore you should focus on engravings that increase your damage instead of increasing your adrenaline. Not every critical engraving is a good one. Critical chance while low health and critical damage while low health are super bad ones, because they only trigger when you are below 25% of your health. But that doesn't mean when you wear the Fax you have automatically the crit chance and crit damage low health engravings applied, because when wearing the Fax that is being considered your new full health. So the full health engravings work when wearing the Fax and not the low health engravings. The low health engravings would only work when you would be below 6.25% health when wearing the Fax. That's even more useless when you have the Fax equipped. Full health is very good, but low health is total crap. Then elemental build-up and duration is not worth using, especially when you consider that elemental damage is also increasing your impact damage. So when I have a fire sword, I also deal all my elemental damage when I hit an enemy, no matter what. Fire damage is applied to your arrows, to your sword, to your weapons, and it is also used when they start burning. But when they start burning, they are already dead, so it's not worth using that at all. And even if you want to burn your enemies, if you want to deal the damage over time from burning or poison, it's still better to increase the damage for poison and fire instead of increasing the duration or the build-up. Armor and health engravings are also not worth using. You should use resistances instead. Resistances are much better and more useful. Once you reach 100% resistance, you will not take any damage from that damage type. So instead of increasing your armor, you will become completely invincible when using resistances. Then we have some bad things left here with increase your movement speed while crouching, increase your overpower damage, totally useless. You can increase it much easier by damage with swords or critical damage. Damage to distant targets is also not worth going for as a hunter, rather use headshot or use critical stuff. Resistance to adrenaline drain, totally useless. only useful in very rare situations in Atlantis. Really not go for this crap here. For all damage, it is not worth keeping it except for torso or on the bow. So when you have all damage on any other item, then you can safely dismantle it as well. I hope you found this useful. I dismantle all my gear according to these rules. That is really what's worth keeping and what's not. So when you stick to these rules, you can make all my builds. You will have all the items needed for all the builds on the channel. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave me a like, and see you next time.